All right, let's do this. Welcome to another deep dive, and today we are marching right into ancient Rome with Ridley Scott's Gladiator. You know, that epic historical drama that hit screens way back in 2000. Swords, sandals, and, well, a whole lot more.
There's definitely a lot more to unpack here, and for you, the learner, we're using the film's Wikipedia page as our main source. It's incredibly thorough, covering everything from the plot and characters to the production, reception, and even the historical, shall we say, embellishments.
Embellishments, I like that. So, our mission today, should you choose to accept it, is to really dissect this cinematic colossus. We're talking about separating the historical fact from the Hollywood fiction, uncovering all those fascinating details, those aha moments, those little things that make you feel like you really know the film inside and out, but without, turning into a Roman history professor overnight.
And you might be surprised by some of the things we uncover along the way. Like, did you know the original script had a real historical figure in it? The guy who actually, strangled Emperor Commodus? Or how about the fact that they actually built a good chunk of the Colosseum, in Malta? We'll get into all that and more as we go.
Okay, so let's start with the story itself, the trauma. The film kind of throws us right into the action, right? We're in, well, what they called Germania in 180 AD.
Exactly. And that's where we meet General Maximus Decimus Meridius, played with such power by Russell Crowe. He's leading the Roman legions to a hard-fought victory over the Marcomanni. This, of course, earns him the respect and admiration of the aging emperor Marcus Aurelius.
And it's here that things get really interesting. For you, the learner, Emperor Marcus Aurelius, he sees something special in Maximus. He doesn't just see a successor in battle, but as the future leader of Rome. And this isn't about just another emperor, right? He's got this much bigger vision in mind.
Oh, absolutely. He wants to restore the Republic. Marcus Aurelius, he recognizes the dangers of absolute power, right? He wants to give the power back to the Senate, to the people, basically go back to the way things were before emperors. And so he shares this pretty radical plan with his son, Commodus. He tells him Maximus will be his protector and eventually his successor.
Talk about some family drama brewing, right? This news doesn't exactly go over well with Commodus, does it?
No, not at all. Driven by jealousy and an all-consuming desire for power, Commodus takes things to a whole new level. He actually murders his own father, Marcus Aurelius, just to get that throne for himself.
Wow, talk about betrayal. And from that moment on, it's pretty clear that Commodus isn't going to be sending Maximus a birthday card anytime soon, right?
Not a chance. Consumed by paranoia and insecurity, he orders the execution of Maximus and, just to be sure, his entire family. He sees Maximus as a massive threat to his power and to his vision for the future of Rome.
But Maximus, he's not one to go down without a fight. He manages to escape, but not without a devastating loss.
He does evade the executioners, but his journey home, that desperate hope of saving his wife and son, it ends in utter tragedy. He gets to his villa only to find them brutally murdered. It's a truly heartbreaking moment, and it really sets the stage for everything that's to come.
From a celebrated general, a hero, to a man who's lost everything, what happens next is both a descent into a brutal world, but also, kind of unexpectedly, the beginning of something extraordinary.
Yeah, it's a real turning point. He's captured by slave traders and sold to Proximo. Now, Proximo is an interesting character. He's a former gladiator himself, earned his freedom, and now he trains others for those bloody spectacles in the arena. And this is where Maximus finds himself fighting for his life in a place called Zuccobar. Though, just a little side note for you, the learner, while Zuccobar is a real place, the film takes some liberties with its location.
And it turns out he's pretty darn good at this whole gladiator thing, right?
Oh, he's incredible. His skills, his strategic mind, it all comes into play. He quickly earns a reputation, becomes known as the Spaniard, a nod to his Iberian roots. But even more importantly, he forms some powerful bonds with the other gladiators, Juba and Hogan.
And those friendships, those really become a lifeline for him, don't they? It's more than just survival at that point.
Absolutely. They share stories of loss, of being displaced, and they find a kind of solace in that shared experience, a kind of renewed strength. And that shared hope, the hope of being reunited with their families in the afterlife, it becomes really central to their journey.
Then, fate throws them a curveball. Proximo's whole gladiatorial troupe gets called up to the big leagues, back to Rome itself.
Yes. Commodus, he's trying to win over the people, so he decides to put on this massive spectacle. 150 straight days of gladiatorial games, supposedly to honor his dead father, who ironically had actually put a stop to such extravagant games years earlier. Proximo sees this as a huge opportunity. He tells Maximus there might even be a chance to earn his freedom, symbolized by getting a rudis, a wooden sword from the emperor himself.
And this really ignites something in Maximus, doesn't it? It becomes more than just freedom. It becomes a path, a chance for revenge, all disguised within this brutal arena.
Exactly. He realizes that winning over the crowd, the Roman people, it could be his most powerful weapon against Commodus. So he starts to really embrace Proximo's guidance, learning how to work the crowd, how to use his skills to make a statement.
So they arrive in Rome, and Maximus gets his first taste of the Colosseum. He's fighting anonymously, hidden behind a mask. Tell us about that first appearance.
It's a grand reenactment of the Battle of Zama, that pivotal battles from the Second Punic War. Maximus, he's leading the gladiators, but no one knows who he is. And he orchestrates this incredible victory, using his tactical brilliance. He has his men form a testudo formation right in the center of the Colosseum.
An underdog victory in a historical reenactment. No wonder Commodus is intrigued.
Oh, he is. He's both intrigued and a little unnerved by how good these gladiators are. So he goes down to meet them once he congratulates them, and he demands that the masked leader reveal himself. And after some back and forth, Maximus dramatically removes his helmet and delivers that iconic line, "My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius."
Commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix legions, loyal servant to the true emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. Chills every time. You really feel the weight of his loss, his determination.
It's an incredibly powerful moment. The crowd goes wild, chanting his name, begging for him to be spared, and Commodus, even though he's visibly shaken and furious, he's forced to give the thumbs up. Maximus lives, for now.
So now everyone knows Maximus is alive. And this is where the political intrigue really kicks into high gear. Lucilla, Commodus' sister, and Maximus' former lover, she comes back into the picture.
She does. She seeks him out, claiming she's afraid of her brother, that he's become a tyrant. She says she has allies in the Senate, people who want Commodus gone, who want to see the Republic restored.
But Maximus, you can't blame him for being suspicious, right? I mean, given everything that's happened.
He's heartbroken and he's angry. He accuses Lucilla of being involved in the murders, or at least of not doing anything to stop them. She denies it, of course, and offers him an alliance, but he's deeply distrustful. He tells her to just forget about him, move on.
But the games continue, and Maximus faces another challenge, another big name in the arena, Tigress of Gaul.
Ugh. Tigress. A legend brought out of retirement by Commodus, specifically to take down Maximus. And to make things even more interesting, they throw some chained tigers into the arena, just a little extra danger for good measure. But Maximus, through skill and cunning, he defeats Tigress.
And then, in a really powerful moment, he chooses to spare Tigress's life. He earns the title Maximus the Merciful. Commodus is, well, let's just say he's not pleased.
Oh, he's furious. He's humiliated, really, by this act of defiance. And by the way, the crowd adores Maximus. He confronts Maximus, insults his family, but Maximus just turns his back on him. It's this silent rejection of Commodus' authority. It just pushes Commodus further over the edge.
And it's against this backdrop of tension that the plan to overthrow Commodus really starts to take shape?
Yes, it all comes together when Maximus is visited by Cicero, his loyal servant. Cicero brings news that Maximus' old legion, the one he commanded, they're still fiercely loyal to him, and they're stationed nearby in Ostia, the port of Rome. This gives Maximus a new hope, a real chance, and he finally agrees to work with Lucilla and Senator Gracchus, who's also against Commodus. The plan is to escape Rome, join the legion, and march on the city.
It's a bold plan, risky, but it's their best shot. And of course, as with any good story, there's always a chance of betrayal lurking in the shadows.
And that betrayal comes from, well, the most likely source, Commodus. He suspects Lucilla is up to something, and he uses her weakness against her. He threatens her son, Lucius, forcing her to reveal the whole plot. It's a chilling scene, really disturbing, because Commodus even hints at, well, inappropriate desires for Lucilla, saying he wants a pure heir. It's swift and ruthless. Senator Gracchus is arrested, and the Praetorian Guard attacks the gladiatorial barracks. Hagen and Proximo are killed defending their comrades. Cicero, trying to help Maximus escape, is shot down by arrows. Maximus himself is eventually captured.
And so we reach the final showdown, Maximus versus Commodus. But Commodus has one last very dirty trick up his sleeve.
He knows he can't beat Maximus fairly, so he cheats. He stabs Maximus before the fight and orders Quinton, his Praetorian commander, to hide the injury from the crowd.
That just shows you the depths of his cowardice. So the fight begins, Maximus is wounded, but he's still burning with defiance.
And he fights like it. Despite the injury, he manages to disarm Commodus. But Commodus, he pulls out a hidden dagger and attacks. They struggle, and finally Maximus kills him. The silence in the Colosseum is deafening.
But this victory comes at a huge cost. Maximus is dying from that wound. What are his final thoughts?
Even as he's dying, he's thinking of Rome, of Marcus Aurelius' vision. He asks Quinton to free Juba and the gladiators, and he begs Gracchus to restore the Republic. With Quinton's promise, he dies in Lucilla's arms, and in his last moments, he sees his family waiting for him in the afterlife.
A powerful end for a hero who fought for justice, for a better future. What happens after his death?
He's given a hero's farewell. His body is carried out of the Colosseum by the people who saw him as a symbol of hope. Commodus's body, on the other hand, is just left there in the sand. Later, Juba goes back to the Colosseum and buries the little statues of Maximus's wife and son in the spot where he fell. He promises to meet Maximus again in the afterlife. It's a beautiful and moving final scene.
So, a truly epic plot. Now let's dive into the personae, the characters who bring this world to life. Maximus, played by Russell Crowe, he's more than just a great warrior, right?
Absolutely. He's a man of honor, loyalty, integrity. He's a devoted husband and father. His home is near Trujillo in modern-day Spain. And it's interesting to note that the role was originally offered to Mel Gibson, who turned it down. He thought he was too old. Antonio Banderas and Hugh Jackman were also considered.
And then you have Commodus, played with such intensity by Joaquin Phoenix. He's driven by jealousy and a lust for power.
Exactly. He's completely corrupt, willing to do anything to get what he wants. In real life, Commodus did succeed Marcus Aurelius, and he was killed by a gladiator named Narcissus. But it didn't happen in the arena. He was actually strangled in a bath.
Then there's Lucilla, played by Connie Nielsen. She's in a tough spot, isn't she? Torn between her loyalty to her brother and her desire for a better Rome.
She is. She's intelligent, politically savvy, and she's desperately trying to protect her son, Lucius, from Commodus's growing tyranny.
And Oliver Reed as Proximo, that was a truly memorable performance. He's a key figure in Maximus's transformation, and there's a bit of a sad story behind his role, isn't there?
There is. This was actually Oliver Reed's last film. He died during filming, and they had to use a digital double to complete his scenes. It was a huge undertaking, costing millions of dollars for just a few minutes of footage. The film is dedicated to his memory.
Senator Gracchus, played by Derek Jacobi, he represents those traditional Roman ideals, right?
He does. He's part of the Senate that opposes Commodus, and he joins forces with Lucilla and Maximus to try and bring back the Republic.
And Juba, played by Jimon Hounsou, he becomes Maximus's closest friend in captivity.
They bond over their shared loss, their longing for home. They support each other through the horrors of their enslavement.
And we can't forget Richard Harris as Marcus Aurelius, the wise emperor who sets the whole story in motion.
He represents the ideal ruler, philosopher king guided by reason. He sees the potential in Maximus. In real life, Marcus Aurelius died in 180 AD, although there's still some debate about the exact location.
We also have Hagen, Proximo's top gladiator before Maximus arrives, played by Ralph Mahler, and Cicero, Maximus's loyal servant, played by Tommy Flanagan.
Hagen starts out as a rival to Maximus, but they eventually come to respect each other. He dies defending the gladiators during the attack. Cicero is a crucial link between Maximus and his old legion. He sacrifices himself trying to help Maximus escape.
And there's General Quinton, who's initially loyal to Commodus but has a change of heart. And of course we have Tigress of Gaul and Lucilla's son, Lucius. It's a rich cast of characters all caught up in these events.
In Quinton's story, it actually gets expanded in the extended edition of the film. He becomes disillusioned with Commodus, which mirrors what happened with the real-life Quintus Aemilius Latus, who was involved in Commodus's assassination. Even the smaller roles add so much to the world of the film.
Speaking of that world, let's talk about the Produzione, the massive undertaking of bringing ancient Rome to life.
It was a huge project. Ridley Scott spent months working out the story before filming even began. They looked at locations all over the former Roman Empire, but in the end, most of the props, sets, and costumes had to be made from scratch.
Just making the armor must have been a massive job.
It was. A company called Armadillo created over 650 suits of armor, some made of steel, some of polyurethane. They even invented a new way of spraying polyurethane for this film. They made something like 27,500 individual pieces of armor in just 3 months.
Now let's talk about the Sceneggiatura, the script. It went through a few changes, didn't it?
It did. The original idea came from David Franzoni, who was inspired by a novel called Those About to Die, which is about gladiators. And his first draft actually had Narcissus, the guy who killed Commodus in real life, as the main character.
So quite different from the story we know. How did Ridley Scott get involved, and what changes did he make?
The producers showed Scott a painting called Police Verso, which shows a gladiator fight. Scott loved the idea of a Roman epic, but he thought the script needed more depth, so he brought in John Logan to rewrite it. Logan is the one who decided to have Maximus's family killed, which really ups the stakes for his revenge.
And Russell Crowe was clearly excited to be part of it all.
Oh, absolutely. He loved the chance to work with Scott and play a Roman general in such a big production.
So let's talk about the reprise, the actual filming. They used some pretty incredible locations, didn't they?
They did. Filming took place over several months in 1999 in 3 main locations. The opening battle scenes were filmed in Bourne Woods in England. And to make it as realistic as possible, they actually set controlled fires in the forest. They used similar filming techniques to Saving Private Ryan, with multiple cameras and different frame rates to capture the chaos of battle.
And then there's the desert setting, the Gladiator training school.
Those scenes were shot in Morocco. The arena where Maximus has his early fights was built from scratch using local materials.
And of course, there's Rome itself, the Colosseum.
That was a massive undertaking. They built a partial replica of the Colosseum in Malta, which stood about 52 feet tall. The rest of it was added digitally later. The set cost about $1 million and was used for many scenes in the film.
And they found some beautiful locations for Maximus's personal life as well.
His villa was in Tuscany, and the scenes in the Elysian Fields, which represent the afterlife, were filmed in the stunning Val d'Orcia region, also in Tuscany.
Now let's talk about the post-produzione, the work done after filming. CGI played a huge role in creating the world of Gladiator.
It was essential. They used CGI to recreate the scale and grandeur of ancient Rome. A company called The Mill did most of the effects, including adding the tigers to the arena, creating the smoke trails from arrows, and enhancing the explosions in the battle scenes. They also used 2,000 extras and motion capture technology to create a virtual crowd of 35,000 people in the Colosseum.
And then there was the digital double of Oliver Reed. That must have been a difficult and sensitive thing to do.
It was. After his death, they had to recreate him digitally to finish his scenes. They used a body double and a 3D model of his face, and it cost an estimated $3.2 million for just 2 minutes of footage. It was a testament to their dedication to the film and to honoring his memory.
The music, the colonna sonora, is another crucial part of the film. The score by Hans Zimmer and Lisa Gerrard is just iconic.
It is. Zimmer's sweeping music, combined with Gerard's haunting vocals, create such an epic and emotional atmosphere. They actually released 2 soundtrack albums because there's so much great music. And it's funny, they actually used music from Conan the Barbarian for the Italian trailer.
All right, let's talk about the distribuzione, the film's release. It premiered in Los Angeles to great reviews.
Yes, it premiered in May of 2000. Critics praised the acting, directing, cinematography, everything really.
And then it was released worldwide.
First in the US, then in the UK and Italy, all in May of 2000.
And then came the home video releases.
First on VHS, then a 2-disc DVD with special features, and finally in 2005, a 3-disc extended edition with extra footage, documentaries, and commentary.
Now, in terms of a Coglianza, the film was a huge hit, both critically and commercially.
Absolutely. It was the second highest grossing film of 2000, only behind Mission Impossible 2. It made about $465 million worldwide, with a strong performance in Italy, of course.
And the reviews were overwhelmingly positive.
It currently has an 80% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a score of 67 out of 100 on Metacritic.
All that success led to some pretty major awards, too.
Gladiator was nominated for 12 Oscars and won 5, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Russell Crowe. It also won awards for costume design, sound, and visual effects. It was nominated for Best Director and Best Supporting Actor as well.
And it won awards from other organizations, too.
Yes, it won Golden Globes, BAFTAs, Screen Actors Guild Awards, Critics' Choice Awards, and many more. It was a global phenomenon.
Now, despite all the acclaim, we do have to acknowledge the inusitezza story, the historical inaccuracies in the film. Ridley Scott wanted to be realistic, but sometimes the story took precedence over the facts. And some historians were pretty upset about that.
Some of them even quit working on the film because of the changes. It's true that you have to take some liberties with historical fiction, but as one historian said, that doesn't mean you can just ignore the facts completely.
So let's start with La Battaglia, the opening battle. How accurate is that depiction of the Roman army fighting the Germanic tribes?
Well, for starters, the battle is supposed to take place in Marcomannia, which was north of the Danube River, not in Germania, where they actually filmed it. And while they got some of the Roman tactics right, there are some mistakes. For example, the Praetorian Guard is shown wearing armor with purple trim, but historically they wore white armor. And the pilum, the Roman javelin, is used as a thrusting spear in the film, when it was actually meant to be thrown. Also, there's some debate about which legion Maximus belonged to. The film calls it the Felix Legion, but there were several legions with that name. It's more likely that he belonged to the 3rd Gallica Felix, or the 50 Flavia Felix, which were stationed in the area, rather than the legions based in Britain, where they filmed the scene. And there are also some inconsistencies in the formations they used during the battle.
What about the death of Marcus Aurelius and the events that follow? How does that line up with history?
Well, the film gets the location of Marcus Aurelius' death right. He did die in Vindobona, which is now Vienna, in 180 AD. But the way he dies, and the whole succession crisis, that's where things get a little murky. You see, in the film, Commodus kills Marcus Aurelius to become emperor. But in reality, there's no evidence that Commodus killed his father. He actually ruled jointly with Marcus Aurelius for 3 years before becoming sole emperor.
So no dramatic patricide in real life?
No, not that we know of. And the film also skips over some interesting details about Commodus's reign. For example, he actually renamed Rome, Colonia Commodiana, after himself, and he was really into gladiatorial combat. He would even fight in the arena himself, although usually against opponents who were, let's just say, less than evenly matched.
So the film kind of downplays his eccentricities.
A bit, yeah. And there are a few other inaccuracies surrounding the portrayal of Marcus Aurelius and Commodus. For instance, in the film, Marcus Aurelius wants to restore the Republic and sees Maximus as the one to lead that change. But in reality, Marcus Aurelius was a strong believer in the imperial system. He even wrote a book called Meditations, which is basically a philosophical guide to being a good emperor. And while he did respect Maximus, historically, Maximus is a fictional character.
Okay, so we've got some fictional liberties taken there. What about the portrayal of I Giochi Gladiatori, the gladiatorial games themselves? How does that stack up against historical accounts?
Well, the film definitely captures the spectacle and the brutality of the games, but there's some inaccuracies in the details. For one thing, the film shows gladiators fighting to the death in almost every match. But in reality, most gladiators were valuable investments, and their owners didn't want to lose them. So most fights were probably less lethal than what we see in the film.
So more like a performance than a fight to the death.
In many ways, yes. And the film also doesn't really show the different types of gladiators and the specific weapons and armor they used. In real life, there were lots of different categories of gladiators, each with their own fighting style and equipment. You had ricciarii, who fought with nets and tridents, seikugers with swords and shields, and many others.
And what about the famous thumbs down gesture, the signal for death? Was that accurate?
Actually, there's some debate about that. Some historians believe that thumbs down actually meant to spare the gladiator, while thumbs up meant to kill him. But the film uses the more popular interpretation of thumbs down, meaning death.
Interesting. Any other inaccuracies worth mentioning?
A few. The film shows gladiators being really lean and muscular, but in reality, they probably had more body fat. It would have protected their organs from blows. And the tiger fight, that was more typical of venations, which were animal hunts, rather than gladiatorial combat. And they probably would have used lions instead of tigers, since lions were more common in the Roman Empire.
And that scene where Commodus throws bread to the people, it's meant to evoke the phrase bread in circuses, right?
It is, but the phrase panem et circenses actually refers to grain dole, which was a free distribution of grain to the poor, and chariot races, which were the most popular form of entertainment in Rome. So it wasn't really about gladiatorial combat.
Okay, some more nuances there. Let's move on to the Colosseo, the Colosseum itself. They built a partial replica for the film, but how accurate was the overall depiction?
Well, the replica was impressive, but there are some historical inaccuracies. First, the name Colosseum didn't come about until much later. In Roman times, it was called the Amphitheatrum Flavium, and the film shows it holding about 50,000 people, but its actual capacity was closer to 80,000.
Wow, that's a lot of people. Any other details they got wrong?
A few. The film shows the Colosseum with a lake next to it, but that lake, which was part of Nero's Domissoria, was actually drained to build the Colosseum. And the Tiber River is shown too close to the Colosseum, and the mountains in the background look more like the mountains near Girona in Spain. And the inauguration date of the Colosseum is off by a few decades.
So a few visual liberties taken there. What about the rest of Architecture di Roma, the architecture of ancient Rome?
There are some anachronisms there, too. The film shows landmarks like the Basilica of Maxentius and the Arch of Constantine, but those were built in the 4th century AD, long after the events of the film. There are some Renaissance-era domes visible in some shots. And the depiction of the Roman Forum in the triumph scene is way too big and doesn't really resemble the actual Forum.
Okay, so the filmmakers played fast and loose with the timeline a bit. Anything else worth pointing out in terms of historical accuracy?
A few smaller things. For instance, in the film, the senators and generals address each other by their first names, which would have been considered very informal in Roman times. And the location of Zuccobar, where Maximus has his early fights, that was a real place, but it was in North Africa, not where the film places it. And the famous line, Ave Caesar, morituri te salutant, which means, Hail Caesar, we who are about to die salute you, that was actually said by condemned prisoners, not gladiators.
And Maximus's line, what we do in life echoes in eternity, that's not from Roman times either, is it?
No, it's not. It's often attributed to a Japanese samurai text from the 18th century called Hagakure.
So there you go, the learner. Even in a film that tries to be historically accurate, there are always going to be some creative choices made. Now, there's been talk of a sequel for years, and it seems like it might actually be happening.
It does. There have been many ideas thrown around, from prequels to sequels focused on Lucius, Lucilla's son. Russell Crowe has even expressed interest in exploring a story about Maximus coming back from the dead based on Roman beliefs about the afterlife. And there was a particularly out-there script by Nick Cave that had Maximus being reincarnated throughout history, but that was ultimately rejected.
Rejected, huh? Sounds like it would have been quite the wild ride. But Ridley Scott, he's always been interested in revisiting this world, hasn't he?
He has. And just recently, Paramount announced that Gladiator II is officially in development. Scott will be directing, and Peter Craig, who wrote Top Gun, Maverick, is writing the screenplay.
Wow, so it's really happening. Do we know anything about the story yet?
Details are still under wraps, but it's supposed to be set 25 to 30 years after the original film.
That's exciting news. I can't wait to see what they come up with. Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about Gladiator. It's a film that continues to capture the imagination, even after all these years. For you, the learner, I hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of not just the film itself, but the historical context, the production process, and all the little details that make it such a cinematic masterpiece.
And it's a great example of how, even in historical fiction, the behind-the-scenes stories can be just as fascinating as the story on screen.
Absolutely. And as a final thought for you, the learner, to ponder. We've talked about all the historical inaccuracies in Gladiator, but despite that, it resonated with audiences and critics alike. Why do you think that is? Does historical accuracy actually matter in a film like this? Or is it more about the story, the characters, the emotions? Food for thought as you continue your own explorations of Gladiator in the world of ancient Rome?
Something to think about, for sure. And until next time, keep diving deep into the world of knowledge.
And keep those swords sharp.